Okay, 24 we said, right? Matthew 24?
Yeah, because I'm going to
Okay,
destruction.
well that's good. We can slowly read through the Passion here, which we don't always get a chance to talk about. All right, who would like to read 24?
I can start.
Okay.
As Jesus came out of the temple and was going away, his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. Then he asked them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I tell you, not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will this be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Jesus answered them, "Beware that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this is but the beginning of the birth pangs. Then they will hand you over to be tortured, and will put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. And many will fall away, and they will betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will rise and lead many astray. And because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the world as a testimony to all the nations. And then the end will come." Well, that's cheerful. So when you see the desolating sacrilege standing in the holy place, as was spoken by the prophet Daniel, the read understand, then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. The one in the housetop must not go down to take what is in the house. The one in the field must not turn back to get a coat. Woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. For at that time there will be great suffering, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now. No, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no one would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. That if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Messiah," or "There he is," do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and produce great signs and omens to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Take note, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, "Look, he is in the wilderness," do not go out. If they say, "Look, he is in the inner rooms," do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the suffering of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day and hour no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal together, one will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an unexpected hour. Who then is the faithful and wise slave whom his master has put in charge of his household to give the other slaves their allowance of food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master will find at work when he arrives. Truly I tell you, he will put that one in charge of all his possessions. But if that wicked slave says to himself, "My master is delayed," and he begins to beat his fellow slaves and eats and drinks with drunkards, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour that he does not know. He will cut him in pieces and put him with hypocrites, while there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Okay. So these two chapters are sort of the last thing that Jesus is trying to get across before his crucifixion. So as one pastor recently commented and said, you can see almost a franticness in Jesus as he's trying to get his message across, and the imperativeness. He's been preaching this entire time, and now he's in Jerusalem, and he sees things coming to a head, and he's being very firm to try to get people's attention. But these chapters there's two ways we can look at them. A lot of what Jesus is saying actually came to pass. It was some of what witnesses saw in 70 AD when there was a huge rebellion in Jerusalem, and basically the Roman Empire said, slaughter them. We're so sick of this. These little Jews in the middle of nowhere have been relentlessly causing us trouble. Bring in your biggest army, kill them. And it was awful. They destroyed the temple, the river, the streets were ankle deep in blood. It was horrific. And people like Matthew are writing most likely after that's happened. And so some of what Jesus is saying about what feels like the end of the world is what people experienced. And they probably thought to themselves, this is it. What could be worse than this? And so they believed, like so many people have, that when things are really bad, it must mean that the end of the world is happening. And so there's that piece where they genuinely thought that sometime it was going to happen soon. Of course, what's more popular among more maybe evangelical is to believe that Jesus is giving us actual symbolism of the end of the world at some point in the future. And it's interesting because, how do I want to say this? We feel like because it's in the Bible, we're supposed to be waiting for the end of the world and we're supposed to believe it. I think this is a relic of another time. I think that they're dealing with such a interesting experience of what they happened at the time, between the time that Jesus lived and died and rose and the beginning of the early church, and everything that happened in those 50 years was like so turbulent and final. And they did think the end of the world was coming. They would have been shocked to learn that there was a 2023. Baffled that we're reading in whatever English is version of Greek scriptures of their accounts. It would be baffling to them. So I just find this whole thing fascinating because there's a part of me that's like, oh, if you're a good Christian, you should be waiting for the end of the world. I'm so over that. I don't think that is a pressing issue. It was to them, and we can honor that. This is where they were. This was a big deal to them. This was people's experience. Jesus is talking about it as relatively imminent to that generation. It made sense. Does that make sense?
I think he had to encourage them to get through that too, or that their faith would have been shattered and the early church would not have survived that.
I mean, Jesus has said that many of them would still be living when his second coming would come. But at the same time, he also spoke so much in parable and didn't always call it out as being a parable.
Yeah.
That you really have to watch out for when you have to read between the lines for him.
We often want to take metaphors literally, and we want to take literal things figuratively. So when Jesus says, you give everything away to the poor, we're like, oh, well, no, he can't possibly mean that, right? But then they say, the moon will turn to blood, and we're like, yep, that's going to happen. I'm looking for it, that's just what makes biblical interpretation difficult. We have, that's why discussions are important and learning about it, because we can kind of get caught up in our own stuff sometimes. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I guess my thought is, clearly this was important to Matthew's community, or this wouldn't be in here. But does this impact our faith now? What does it teach us about how to be Christian now? And if that is a huge, important thing, then we should pay attention to it. But if it isn't, I think we can let it go. I do want to say that in verses 40, 41, 42, where it says, 2 will be in the field, 1 will be taken, and 1 will be left. This is one of the random puzzle pieces that were put together for the whole Left Behind thing. Mm-hmm. And I really want you to think of it as a puzzle piece. It was not good systematic theology. It was one verse here out of context, one verse here out of context, and then here's the Left Behind story. But what's interesting is that not only might this have happened when there was the uprising, where one person was killed and one survived. Let's say it is the rapture. We don't know if it's the good ones taken or the good ones left. It doesn't say.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah,
Well, it's very much something the Romans would have done too in subjugating a population.
there you go.
Yeah, they would, if they were trying to subjugate a population, if this was a foretelling of the revolt, the Romans could have gone through and said, hey, I see a bunch of people, kill half of them.
Right.
Just randomly, because we got to teach them a lesson. And they would
Yes.
absolutely do that.
Yeah.
Because they know they need to leave some alive, because who's going to pick the fields? Mm-hmm. They don't want to actually completely destroy the economy of this region,
Just the spirit.
just the spirit, exactly. So they stop revolting.
I want to throw in one more comment. I think some of you may have your own thoughts on this, those of us that are old enough. But every 20, 25 years, there's a rise in this rapture thinking,
Yeah.
and then it ebbs, and we don't hear anything.
There's a rise in what, did you say?
Rapture thinking.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
The
talking
whole
about,
Left Behind series
talking about the
kind of
rapture.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
End of the
It
world.
rises and it swells and whatever buying into it, and then it kind of fades. And I just recently read an article from a more conservative thing talking about how it's faded. Because I can't remember the reason why, but it is faded. They weren't trying to revive it.
Okay.
That wasn't the point, it's just that noticing that we're not preaching that. Yeah, it's not
Falls out of fashion.
Well, it falls out of fashion, but it's just almost like your infinity and talking about the ebb and flows.
Sure.
It's,
You can't sustain that kind of manic energy forever.
no,
It was interesting when, in 2005, I was speaking with a woman who was clearly more of a evangelical Pentecostal, and she started talking about how the end must be coming soon, look at the signs. And then she started quoting about wars and things like that, and I thought, have you studied history? There's never been a moment on this planet, and we're only aware of really European history because we're so narrow in our focus. But just if you look at like African history alone, they've had people every bit as destructive as Hitler, whose names we don't even know, who've committed the same amount of genocide. That blew me away, because we're all like, oh, Hitler was the worst ever, and
no, Pol Pot was.
well, come to find out, like there have been people
Yeah.
like him all around the world who've done horrific forms of genocide. We just hear about it more now because of the internet, and news is so much more. But it's hard to argue with that, though. Like I just leave it, because how do you say, no, the end of the world isn't coming? Well, how do you know? I don't. So
I hope it isn't.
I mean,
Maybe that's
What
the
I
answer.
hear a little bit in this too is, okay, so why wait around to do God's will and stuff like this? Now is the time to do it. You know, to me, that's what I hear. It's just,
Yeah. Well, you were saying, what is it? What can this tell us now? So maybe that's what it can tell us now. We could be cut down by evil foes at any moment, so maybe we shouldn't wait around.
yeah,
We should do the work now.
We're good. We're all going to have some sort of destruction in our life. We're going to die and
Yeah.
whatever. So now is the time to follow Jesus and love your neighbor and do all the things that we're supposed to do. Not wait for close to the end of the time.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is, I mean, they pointed out, we're all going to die. I mean, whether it be on our way home after this service with some tragic car crash, even though we're perfectly healthy at the moment, or it be, God willing, another 30, 40 years down the road.
Yeah.
That is coming, and the end of the world is coming. This sun is going to burn out, and it'll take the rest of the solar system with it. Hopefully, we'll be off this rock as well by that time. But that's
Well, we don't know.
we have the time that we have allotted now, and our time is finite. So make what we can out of it.
It's more of an individual thing.
And this is actually a perfect transition because I think chapter 25 goes exactly there. So he kind of scares everybody with the end of the world, and then chapter 25, all the parables are, what are you doing with your time? So does someone want to read 25? A lot of good ones in here.
Then the kingdom of heaven will be like the 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps have gone out, or are going out." But the wise replied, No, there will not be enough for you and for you. You better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves. And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came. And those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other bridesmaids came also saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake therefore, for you do not know neither the day nor the hour." For it is if a man was going on a journey, summoned his slaves, and entrusted his authority to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who received the 1 talent went off and took a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, "Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made you 5 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." And the one who had 2 talents also came forward, saying, "Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. I have made 2 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, "Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would receive what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10 talents. For all who have been entrusted, for to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Can someone else take over by Isaac?
Well, let's stop there. I think those
Yeah,
are,
this one is harsh. This one
It is harsh.
do
That
not
one
like.
seems so unfair.
Matthew is all the weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Yes,
Matthew
but,
alone.
He's so dramatic.
I know.
I mean, this whole aspect of, in both cases, the slave who was given 5 reaped 5 more. The slave who was given 2 reaped 2 more. So they had the same percentages of returns. And frankly, having done my share of investing and such, I know that the more you have on hand, actually, the easier it is to gain a greater percentage of it in today's markets, because, of course, you need a certain amount just to cover your own base expenses. And this whole he gathers where he did not sow and reaps where he did not scatter. It's just, I can see where this guy is. Someone who rules by fear does not oftentimes inspire others to necessarily work for him either. It's just,
I think I can see the point that Matthew was trying to make, but maybe Matthew just didn't understand banking very well.
Yeah, and this is where parables aren't always exact equivalents, because we can get caught up in the details versus kind of what's the parallel that he's trying to make. So I think of it as we are each born with our own gifts and talents and personalities, and we were born in different positions in life. So some of us had a lot of privilege. So we came into this world with 5 talents, and therefore it's easier for us to have influence. It's easier for us to make an impact because we're already on third base. People who started out with very little to nothing, it's not necessarily expected that they're going to be able to accomplish what we did, but they were still given gifts and talents, and they were put in a particular place to see what they can do. I mean, you hear about teachers in India and certain impoverished countries and cities where they teach like 60 kids under a highway by having the kids use the dirt as their writing and their fingers as the writing, and they find a single piece of chalk and they write it on the wall, and that's how they teach. Now that's someone who had 1 talent and made it 10, right?
right.
And then I think about people in this world who have so much privilege and so much power, and not only are they not, just because you're making money does not mean you're obeying this, right? Because this isn't about money, this is about spreading the love, this is about making the world a better place, and infecting other people in a positive way. And they're not only not doing that, they're doing the reverse. So they're actually sucking away from people, which probably, if you think of it in terms of talents, they're reducing their own talents. So I'm just going to throw him under the bus because it's an easy one, but like a Jeff Bezos type of person, where you have your employees peeing in tin cans because you've made it so impossible for them to have a humane break, while you sit on more money than anyone could make. If they'd saved $10,000 a day for the last 2,000 years, you still wouldn't have as much money as him.
Yeah.
So to me, like, there's just, this is a story about God gave us the purpose of life is for us to shine our light, to learn, to discover, and to like band together and help other people. And we all have different avenues that we can do that, and different ways that we can do that. And that's what matters. And I think I've hit it.
It's like some people get 5 talents and then bury them.
Yeah. 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 It's an amazing example of the difference between what capitalism calls success, what America calls success, and what God would call success. What is a successful life as a Christian? Is where you look back and you go, was the world a slightly better place because of me? You doubled your talents.
So I guess maybe the point of this one is, if you only have 1 talent, you see everybody else get more. If you let fear keep you from using that talent because you're
huge.
afraid of losing it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Maybe that's-
Perfect.
Yep.
That was perfect, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, what you talked about today in your service, ebb and flow, like this. I think that, we have these talents, and then we give them, and then we receive them, and it just keeps going like this. But if you just keep taking and you don't get If you don't give, you don't get the gift of understanding what it is to receive and the rest, and the gift of knowing how wonderful it is that God gave you the ability to give something. You don't
Yeah.
get that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you don't really realize that it isn't from you. These are gifts. And right there is the hugest gift to figure that out.
Yeah. And it all kind of comes to the head here with this last parable. Ben, can I make you read 31 to the end?
When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you are blessed by my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me, and I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of those who are the members of my family, you did it to me." Then he will say to those at his left hand, "You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you did not give me clothing, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they also will answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you sick, when we saw you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life."
So this all goes back to what you said about how we don't know when the end of all things will be. So how do we live our life? What does Jesus want us to do? And these parables, we didn't really talk about the bridesmaids, but when I mentioned it several weeks ago in the sermon, the image of the lamp and having oil in your own lamp. And lamp being the light, the enlightenment, being aware, being awake, knowing what's going on. You're the only one who can truly keep the oil in your own lamp. You're the only one who truly can be responsible for understanding and living your life. And then you're given talents in this life to do something with. Well, what are we supposed to do? The next one actually explains it. Feed the hungry, clothe the poor. That's how you double your talents. So it's interesting parables all in a row of saying this is what we're spending our life doing. And if you need to be told to love your neighbor and to love the least of the least, there's no oil in your lamp. You haven't figured it out.
There's one phrase that was used today by our Gideon guest.
What? Can you speak
One
louder?
phrase that turned me off by our Gideon guest.
Yeah.
Save the lost. And there was a time in my history when I bought into that. But it's broad in the sense that, in terms of understanding how God works in this world and so on. And what was the known world during Jesus' time? Were they thinking of the Chinese and of people else? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, yeah.
And the idea of God's revelation wherever God chooses.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world does not share well, our Bible claims we all share the same history of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob going all the way back to Adam and Eve. That's the claim. Okay. But in terms of a worldview, and so when I heard that phrase, which and I feel bad about that in one way, because that's what I know he believes. And I respect that, but at the same time,
Yeah.
who's, yeah.
Yeah, how we define lost is huge, and how we define save is huge. Because there has been a trajectory that's like, to save is to make someone believe the right belief. And lost is you don't have the right belief.
Because you don't know Jesus. Like I
Yeah,
do.
if you don't believe in Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, therefore you are lost. And I think we've done great harm in the past with that definition.
Yeah.
And I see a much more helpful understanding as, you know truly who are lost because they are miserable. And anyone can be lost. You can be a Christian, an atheist, a Buddhist, whatever, and be miserable because of circumstances that feel beyond your control. And then to save would be to free from suffering, right? Whether it's external or internal suffering. So I just wrote our Tuesday Bible study. We're studying mystics. And we've gone through a bunch of Christian mystics, and we still have a couple weeks left. So I decided to use some contemporary people, and I wrote a lesson on Eckhart Tolle. Do any of you know Eckhart Tolle? He wrote The Power of Now, he was on Oprah in like 2002 or something. And this book just like went everywhere. So he was born in 1948 in Germany and had a very normal, generic life. And then when he was 29 years old, had such a deep bout of depression. He'd had these huge bouts of depression. He didn't think he could live with himself anymore. And he went to bed one night saying, I can't live with myself. And then he woke up and this thought came, who is thinking I can't live with myself? Who is the myself I can't live with? And then he had this like experience. It's just like everything shifted and changed. And he entered this like blissful state where he all of a sudden saw the suffering of his mind as being just his mind being kind of sick, and that there was something standing behind his mind, and that we'd call that the soul. And for the next 2 years, he was in this state of bliss where he'd just sit on the park bench looking at the world going, wow, everything is so beautiful. People started coming to him, and his teaching is incredibly, incredibly simple. He basically says the cause of suffering is in our own mind. We're projecting our illness and our misperceptions and the own craziness that we're inventing out in the world and insisting on suffering. And for him, he says, just being in the moment and not believing your thoughts and just seeing what is right here, right now, is the first step towards that losing its hold. And so his whole thing, it's very Buddhist, is to ease you of suffering through the power of now. It's very, very simple. And he's one of the most peaceful, calm, loving human beings ever. Is he saved? I don't know if he wouldn't use that language. He would say that he feels at one with being.
On earth.
Yeah, with the big, with like the sacred, with being a capital B. And some people would say, no, he's not saved because he doesn't confess Jesus as his Lord and Savior. But he was near suicidal, and now he's a deeply at peace spiritual teacher helping millions of people around the planet. Is he
He's
saved?
taken his gifts
Yeah,
and done something with them.
yeah.
And a person that has suffered from depression, I can tell you, absolutely, what you put in your mind, your thoughts that you put in your mind cause your body and everything else to go into and stuff like that. If you keep putting fear in there and that, like that is, so I think that just the way he said it was how he's putting stuff in, and then you change your narrative, what you're hearing or saying to yourself. That is the one thing in our generation that we've been able to do better than anything is to realize that how you talk to yourself, how important that is, how you talk to yourself in the results.
And I think one of the things I learned from him is that your thoughts are not you. Whatever thoughts are going through your head aren't necessarily real. It's just the product of a mind that's just constantly kicking, constantly going. And at any point you can say, I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
You can control.
Yeah.
You can do mind control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what meditation is.
Sure.
Is seeing your thoughts and going, I don't believe you.
And if you go back to another deal that I think you talked about one time about a woman or something, or said that she wanted to meditate and be so like this, and she's having all these crazy random thoughts. And once you really realize, wow, this is pretty normal. This is normal, and I'll do the best I can with this. But, to think that we're going to stop that, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and with the saved thing, maybe that's not really what we should be focusing on. It's not our job to know what saved means. Jesus never said, save my sheep. He said, feed my sheep. He said, love my sheep.
Yeah,
He didn't say, save my sheep.
Look at you,
So,
the honor student today.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's not what we should be focusing on.
I agree.
yeah.
At the same time, though, well, I'm sure there are Gideons, and it may even be one of their fundamental teachings to use the Bible to bring others to Christ. Some of the stories that inspire them are the stories of people going to hotel rooms with the intent of ending their own lives, and they have, some of them have come across the Bible, and in one last act of desperation, they start reading through it, and they find something that inspires them to wait on taking their lives, or turns their lives around. And so there's someone who's been saved, not necessarily by finding Jesus per se, but just at the very least finding something in the book that has inspired them to not take their lives, so their lives have been saved for a little bit longer. I mean, yes, we do ultimately die, so I mean,
I
good
think-
has been done.
Absolutely, and I think it can be a both and. I don't think we need to say like, okay, well, we're not talking about people. There are people who absolutely their life and spirit has shifted its trajectory because of encounter through the Bible, through a Christian church, through so on and so forth. I never ever want to deny that or belittle that, but it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's bigger than that. I think instead of saying, okay, yeah, that's true, and that's the only definition. Nope. Open it up, and let's listen to the stories of people whose life has shifted and changed trajectory in a beautiful way through other methods, through other resources, and realize God's probably working through all of them. God's going to have
That's the thing.
as many pathways as humanly possible to get to us. And so that works for that person, but something completely different has to get this person over here to change the suffering that they're in.
Yeah.
And your Bible bangers that think that everything's like this, how much have we pounded people down?
Yes.
with the
Oh
Bible?
man, yeah.
Just unbelievable. A weapon, such a weapon.
That's
You
a
know
good
what?
book.
That
You never get
last
someone
week,
ahead with it.
The sermon could have gone on longer, but it felt like it was a good time yet. The point is, I told you I was going to research more of this stuff. How
Yes, you did.
Christianity has been used in our history over and over again to force political gains, to
Yeah.
force political issues.
Yes, you do.
And if you remember, I mentioned that Pope John III in 15, whatever it was, saying that the Native Americans are not savages because they were looked upon as, okay, they weren't savages, but they were still heathen. Yeah, and they still need to be converted, okay? And there's just all this monkey business going on in the history where over and over again, people are clubbed to the Bible just as something to force to get my way. Not really because it has for the sake of Jesus or something. It's just, I could have gone on about this.
And you did, and I loved it. I thought it was a
But
great sermon.
I also eventually came to a stop. Because, you get the feeling inside, I've gone on long enough. I'm getting tired of hearing myself. But the reality
good. It
is,
was
we've
good.
done so much in our history
Yep.
to abuse Christianity as my club to get my way, if I can put it that term,
Right.
or our way.
If I can end with this thought, at least let us first alleviate the suffering that comes from hunger and homelessness and lack of food and care, as it says in Matthew 25. When we, in Jesus' name, eliminate that most basic suffering, then people actually have the energy and the time to focus on alleviating those other kinds of suffering. And so much mental health issues come back to a lack of safety, a lack of security. And so one of the most Christian things we can do is to advocate for a country and a world without poverty and homelessness, where everyone has their basic needs met, so that then we have the time and energy to work in collaboration to solve all the other problems and save what can be saved in its own way.
Raise your hand.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll keep going next week.